I never thought I'd find myself sitting alone in the quiet living room, clutching a worn photo album as if it could shield me from the storm brewing just beyond the walls. The air was thick with tension, punctuated only by the faint ticking of the grandfather clock that once belonged to my mother. At 40, I've become the invisible backbone of this family, the silent provider who manages everything behind the scenes. Bills, care appointments, family squabbles. My name barely crosses anyone's lips unless there's a problem needing fixing. My role feels like a shadow, necessary but unseen. Today was no different. I had just finished organizing my father's upcoming medical appointments, coordinating with his doctors and pharmacists to ensure his prescriptions were ready for pickup. The routine is exhausting, but familiar, a cycle I've embraced since my mother passed away 2 years ago. She was the heart of this family, and when she died, the weight of holding everyone together fell on my shoulders. I arranged her memorial service, handled every detail from the floral arrangements to the seating chart, all while keeping my grief private. No one thanked me. They barely noticed. Ivy Jenkins sat across the room, her posture immaculate, lips curved in that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. My stepmother's presence was always a paradox, a mix of warmth and quiet frost. She probes with subtle remarks disguised as care, like when she mentioned today, "Are you sure you don't need a break? You've been doing so much." The words felt more like an accusation than a suggestion. I caught her eyes flicker with something unreadable. Envy, maybe, or impatience. But I swallowed the discomfort and smiled back, assuring her I was fine. It's easier to pretend everything's normal. Yet beneath the surface, something unsettled me. For years, I've held on to a secret power, a legal right that no one suspects. As the executor of my mother's estate, I possess the detailed photographic inventory and ownership of her exquisite jewelry collection, valued at $28,000. Each piece carries a story, a memory woven into the fabric of my family's history. I've kept this knowledge close, not out of greed, but because I hoped it would never have to stir conflict. It's a silent strength, my quiet reserve, a safeguard for uncertain times. Still, as I watched Ivy's smile fade when my father's name came up in conversation, I sensed the fragile harmony could shatter any moment. Hope clings stubbornly to me, that family ties born from love can outlast the fractures beneath the surface. But the unease lingers, like a shadow at dusk, always present, never fully understood. I remember a Christmas from my teenage years with vivid clarity, the first holiday season after Ivy came into our lives. Back then, she wore the guise of kindness, a woman eager to join our family. But even in those early days, her favoritism was unmistakable. Lisa, my younger sister, was showered with gifts that sparkled and shone. An expensive necklace that caught every eye, wrapped in glossy paper and tied with satin ribbons. Meanwhile, I unwrapped a cheap scarf, its fabric thin and scratchy, a stark contrast to the lavishness next to me. Ivy's voice rang out warmly when she said, "Lisa's always been Mom's favorite, hasn't she?" The words struck me like a cold gust of wind. My father, Frank, sat nearby, his silence deafening. He never challenged Ivy's assertions or uneven treatment, his passivity a quiet endorsement of the division growing between us. I learned early on that the family dynamic was a delicate dance, one where I had to play my part without complaint. I tried to convince myself it was just her way, an odd form of tough love, perhaps. Maybe Ivy thought favoring Lisa was a means to bond, to create a new sense of family after Mom's passing. But beneath the surface, the message was clear. I was peripheral, less valued, less seen. A memory still burns bright in my mind. One winter evening at a relative's house when Ivy openly criticized my career choice. Surrounded by family, she scoffed, "Fundraising? That's hardly a respectable profession. Lisa's business career. Now that's something to be proud of." The sting of those words lingered long after the gathering ended. I felt invisible, diminished. as if my 15 years of hard work and dedication meant nothing. Ivy's subtle barbs chipped away at my confidence, planting seeds of doubt that took years to wrestle down. My parents' reluctance to intervene left Ivy free to tighten her grip on the family narrative, while I tried desperately to keep the peace, to hold us all together. Through that haze of masked hostility and overlooked sacrifices, I clung to the hope that love would prevail. But even now, I wonder if I was simply a pawn in Ivy's game, destined to be sidelined no matter how much I gave. Over the last decade, I've poured myself into this family, financially, emotionally, and physically. I quietly contributed $12,000 each year toward the mortgage and medical expenses, often covering debts I later discovered belonged to Ivy. There were nights I canceled planned vacations, swallowing disappointment so I could help pay for Dad's surgery. While Ivy and Lisa boarded planes to exotic destinations, I stayed home, arranging care and juggling work obligations. Daniel, my husband, noticed the toll it took on me. One evening, as we sat quietly in our kitchen after the kids were asleep, he asked softly, "Julie, why do you keep giving so much without anyone really appreciating it?" His words unsettled me. I wanted to believe that recognition would come eventually, that someday the family would see all I've done. But deep down, a tiny seed of doubt was taking root. Lisa's allegiance feels complicated. Sometimes she sides with Ivy, swept up in her stepmother's charm and influence. Other times, she offers fleeting sympathy, a whisper of understanding that doesn't quite reach my heart. My father remains mostly silent, his quiet avoidance of confrontation a barrier I can't break through. In contrast, Ivy's duplicity sharpens daily, the facade of warmth she displays in public masking the cold manipulations behind closed doors. Yet my silent power remains intact. I am the executor of my mother's estate. The entire collection of jewelry, every ring, necklace, and bracelet is legally mine, carefully documented with detailed photographs and insurance policies. I've never revealed this to the family, choosing instead to keep it as a quiet assurance, a safety net should the need arise. It's a secret strength I carry with me, even if no one else knows. The night of Dad's birthday party was the first time Ivy truly crossed an unspoken line in front of the family. The dining room was filled with relatives, laughter, and the clatter of cutlery. But beneath it all, a current of tension crackled. Ivy's voice cut through the noise, sharp and deliberate. "Julie's fundraising? Honestly, it's just a hobby. She's never really contributed to our family's wealth." The words hung in the air, heavy and brutal. Lisa's gaze dropped to her plate, while Daniel's eyes flickered with surprise. Some relatives shifted uncomfortably. Others laughed nervously, unsure how to respond. My chest tightened, and a hot wave of humiliation flushed through me. All the years of silent support, the sacrifices, the unseen work, dismissed in an instant. I wanted to scream, to defend everything I'd done, but my voice caught in my throat. Instead, I forced a calm reply. "That's not true." It felt small, insufficient, but I couldn't let the situation spiral. The sting of Ivy's words was sharp, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of an outburst. I excused myself quietly from the table, heart pounding, the room suddenly feeling suffocating. Outside, the cool night air did little to ease the ache inside. As I leaned against the porch railing, I tried to rationalize her cruelty. Maybe Ivy was stressed, or jealous of what she couldn't claim for herself. Maybe it was just a moment of weakness masked as malice. But even as I told myself these things, a seed of doubt took root. Could Ivy ever truly respect me? Or was I destined to remain invisible, a silent provider overshadowed by the stepmother's cunning? The question lingered, unanswered, as the family's laughter drifted faintly from the house behind me. Ivy's smile morphed into something colder, sharper, the moment she sensed I wasn't retreating quietly. My small refusal to let her words slide, my quiet defense at Dad's birthday, only seemed to ignite a new level of cruelty in her. The next days were a blur of whispered conversations and sideways glances. Ivy began weaving stories, subtle but poisonous, among relatives. "Julie just wants the spotlight," she murmured to Aunt May over coffee. "She's so controlling, always playing the victim." I caught the way her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, her eyes flicking around as if to ensure others were listening. The rumors spread, morphing and twisting with each retelling. Lisa, caught in Ivy's web, began pulling away. Our conversations dwindled to polite exchanges at best. One afternoon, she called to cancel a planned lunch, her voice hesitant and clipped. "I've been thinking, maybe we just need some space right now." I wanted to ask why to crack the barrier between us, but something in her tone made me hold back. Ivy's influence was tightening, a noose that constricted my relationships with those I once trusted. Family members who once looked to me with warmth now questioned my motives. "Julie's always so sensitive," they said behind my back. "She makes mountains out of molehills." The words stung because they sounded eerily like Ivy's own accusations. Worse was the gaslighting. Ivy told mutual friends, "Julie doesn't really understand how family dynamics work here." I heard it from Claire, a longtime family friend who paused awkwardly when I brought up a concern, then said, "Maybe Ivy's right. Sometimes it feels like you're overreacting." Even Frank, my father, seemed to shrink under Ivy's sway. When I tried to voice my worries, he brushed them off with a distracted, "You're reading too much into it, Julie. Just let it go." The isolation crept in slowly, like a chill spreading through a room when the heating fails. I found myself doubting my own perceptions, wondering if I was imagining the hostility or if my efforts were truly being viewed as selfishness. At night, lying awake, I replayed every conversation. Was I really the villain in this tangled narrative? The family dynamics felt like quicksand. The harder I struggled, the deeper I sank. Ivy's attacks weren't just random. They were calculated, designed to destabilize me emotionally and socially. Yet beneath the confusion and exhaustion, a quiet resolve settled. I wasn't sure where this battle was leading, but I knew I couldn't back down. To survive, I had to keep my footing, even if the ground shifted beneath me. With each day, the tug-of-war grew more exhausting. My protests, small and measured, were met with Ivy's growing aggression. The delicate balance of family peace shattered a little more with every whispered rumor, every dismissive glance. I felt like a ghost in my own family, fading into the background as Ivy's narrative took center stage. But somewhere inside, a stubborn flame flickered. I wasn't just going to disappear, not without a fight. I knew I had to try for peace, even if my heart bristled against the idea. So I asked Ivy for a private conversation, hoping to clear the air before the damage became irreparable. We met in the muted light of the family room, the air heavy with unsaid words. I spoke calmly, threading my voice with facts, laying out my contributions to the family's well-being, the years of financial support, the countless hours of care. I told her how it felt to be overlooked, to be dismissed as the controlling one, when all I wanted was respect and honesty. I appealed to her own expressed desire for family unity, hoping to find common ground beneath the tension. But Ivy's response was a performance I hadn't anticipated. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't genuine sorrow. They were weapons. "I'm the one who's overwhelmed," she said, voice trembling with practiced fragility. "You don't see how hard this has been for me." Then came the threat, barely veiled. "If you push too hard, you'll shatter the family." The room felt colder as Frank sided with her, calling me too harsh and unrealistic. The distant cousin acting as family mediator added his weight by dismissing my concerns as family drama, as if decades of hidden resentment and sacrifices could be reduced to mere theatrics. I left the conversation feeling smaller, diminished, not by my own words, but by the collective disbelief and dismissal. My hope for peace, fragile as it was, crumbled under their collective judgment. Yet, despite the blow to my spirit, I refused to lose my composure. I kept my voice steady, my expression calm, even as the walls I'd tried to build around my heart trembled. The attempt to resolve things peacefully had failed, but my resolve remained unbroken. The gulf between us had widened, and Ivy's manipulation was clear. She wasn't interested in honesty or unity. She wanted control, and she was willing to use every tear, every accusation to get it. I walked away from that room carrying a heavy weight, but also a solemn promise to myself. I would not let this define me. The charity gala was supposed to be a night of celebration, a moment where years of dedication to my work would be recognized. Instead, it became the stage for Ivy's most brazen attack yet. The grand ballroom buzzed with chatter, the clink of glasses, and the soft strains of a string quartet. I stood near the podium, nerves fluttering with a mix of pride and anxiety. Then Ivy appeared, holding a folded piece of paper with a cruel smile that didn't reach her eyes. Without warning, she stepped forward and read aloud a personal email I had written months ago, one where I vented about the burdens of family care and expressed exhaustion. She framed it as proof of my selfishness and ingratitude. The words echoed through the room, slicing through the warmth of the evening. Faces stiffened. Whispers erupted. I saw colleagues exchange uncertain glances, their respect replaced by awkward discomfort. Daniel's jaw tightened beside me, his usual support palpable but strained. The email, meant as a private release valve for my frustrations, became a weapon in Ivy's hands, damaging not only my reputation, but the professional relationships I had cultivated with such care. Fundraising is built on trust and goodwill. Tonight, that trust was fractured. The sting of betrayal cut deep, but I forced myself to remain composed, masking the devastation behind a poised smile. Inside, the walls I'd erected trembled under the weight of Ivy's calculated cruelty. Her triumphant look as she orchestrated the humiliation was unmistakable. It was no accident. This was a strategic move to undermine me on every level, emotionally, socially, professionally. The realization was sobering. Ivy's campaign wasn't a series of petty slights. It was an ongoing assault designed to isolate and discredit me completely. I swallowed the bitter taste of defeat, but a flicker of something fierce stirred within me. This was no longer just about family drama. It was war. The tension simmering beneath the surface reached its boiling point when I confronted Ivy about her mounting debts, suspecting what she'd been concealing. With a steady voice, I offered a payment plan, a practical solution to ease the financial strain that I believed was poisoning our family's dynamics. More than money, I asked for what I'd long needed: respect and honesty in how we dealt with each other, especially concerning our late mother's legacy. Ivy's reaction was icy, colder than I had ever seen. Her eyes narrowed, and her smile twisted into something bitter. "This is meddling, Julie," she said sharply. "I don't need your charity or your judgment." The words hit me like a slap. But it was what she said next that crossed a line. She threatened to sell our mother's jewelry, the very collection I held as executor, without consulting me or the family. It was a blatant act of betrayal, one that disregarded not only protocol, but the memories woven into each piece. I felt vulnerable, exposed, but I stood firm. "I trusted you," I said quietly, the hurt clear in my voice. "This is betrayal." The weight of those words hung between us. Ivy's response was a cold dismissal as she turned and walked away, leaving me with the raw ache of rejection and the stark realization that every peaceful path had been exhausted. No olive branch was accepted. No bridge could be rebuilt. In that moment, I understood the gravity of what I was facing. Ivy wasn't just an adversary in family politics. She was a relentless force willing to destroy trust and rewrite our history for her gain. The truth settled heavily on my shoulders. To protect myself and what's left of my family's honor, I would need to find strength in ways I had never imagined. This was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming my dignity in the face of calculated cruelty. The moment I realized Ivy had sold pieces from the jewelry collection without my knowledge, a crushing wave of despair washed over me. I had always trusted that as executor, the collection, the tangible legacy of my mother, would remain intact, a symbol of family unity. Now that trust felt shattered by the cold, deliberate act of betrayal. The news came not from Ivy, but from a whispered conversation I overheard at a family gathering, where someone mentioned the sale of 2 pieces worth at least $12,000. The shock was immediate. How could she have done this without a word to me, without even a hint to the rest of the family? I confronted Ivy privately, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain composed. "Why didn't you tell me? Why would you sell those pieces without consulting me?" My heart pounded, a mix of anger and confusion swirling in my chest. Ivy's eyes glittered with a practiced calm. "You weren't involved in managing the collection," she said smoothly. "I was handling what the family needed. You're too controlling, Julie, always trying to micromanage everything." Her words stung. They echoed the rumors she'd been spreading, how I was unreasonable, inflexible, even selfish. The isolation began to feel suffocating. Lisa, who once stood close, now kept her distance, siding openly with Ivy. At family dinners, her polite but cold smiles felt like knives twisting in the wound. Daniel, my rock, tried to reassure me, but even he expressed doubt one evening. "Maybe you're pushing too hard, Julie? Maybe some things aren't worth the fight," he said, his voice heavy with concern. His words cut deeper than he meant, planting seeds of self-doubt that gnawed at me late into the night. Was I really the problem? Had my years of sacrifice gone unnoticed, unvalued? The exhaustion was physical, a weight on my limbs and a fog in my mind. Still, beneath the swirl of confusion, a faint ember of resolve glowed. If I was to be alone in this, I would face it on my own terms, no matter how dark the path ahead looked. I felt the house closing in around me. The laughter and chatter of relatives became a background noise, a reminder that I was no longer part of their shared narrative. Each whispered accusation or sideways glance chipped away at my confidence. The line between reality and doubt blurred dangerously. I wrestled with the gnawing question. Was I imagining this? Had I misunderstood their coldness? Yet every time I reviewed the interactions, the pattern of isolation was unmistakable. Ivy's calculated charm had poisoned the well of family trust, and I was left stranded on the outside, a silent witness to my own erasure. Even in my lowest moments, when despair threatened to swallow me whole, I found myself clinging to one constant: Daniel's steady support. His presence was a lifeline in a sea of betrayal and doubt. One night, as I sat on the porch steps, the cool air barely brushing my heated cheeks, he reached out and took my hand. "You're not alone, Julie. I see you. I know who you are," he said softly. His words weren't enough to erase the pain, but they grounded me. In that quiet moment, I made a silent vow. I wouldn't disappear beneath Ivy's shadow. I would find a way to reclaim my voice, my dignity. The betrayal had hurt me deeply, but it had not broken me. Not yet. Weeks passed, and the rumors only grew louder, Ivy's venomous whispers weaving a tapestry of lies around me. The family room, once a place of comfort, now felt like a battlefield. One afternoon, I found Lisa avoiding my gaze, her excuses for distance thin and fragile. "Maybe we just need space," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words stung. Space felt like exile. I wanted to reach out, to remind her of the years we'd shared, but Ivy's influence had created a wedge too wide to cross. The ache of isolation settled deep in my bones. If this was what it meant to be the silent provider, to be the unseen pillar of the family, then I had to reconsider what I was willing to endure. My doubts threatened to spiral, but beneath them, A new clarity began to emerge. I would no longer be ignored, no longer dismissed. Ivy's betrayal was a call to action, and I was listening. The day I found the bill of sale for the entire jewelry collection was the moment everything changed. It wasn't just the 2 pieces anymore. This was the whole legacy, gone without my consent or knowledge. The official document lay on the kitchen table, the stark black and white print a brutal confirmation of Ivy's betrayal. The date was chilling, post my mother's death, and the signatures undeniable. My hands trembled as I held the paper, the weight of the loss settling like stone in my stomach. There was no mistaking it. Ivy had sold the entire collection to a local pawn shop, pocketing $28,000, and had the audacity to do so behind my back. I called the police immediately, filing a report that felt both necessary and surreal. How had it come to this? The betrayal was no longer a whispered rumor or a subtle slight. It was concrete, irreversible, and public. I arranged for a family meeting the next day, determined to confront the truth head-on. When I presented the bill of sale to everyone gathered, the room fell into stunned silence. Lisa's face paled, Frank's eyes darted nervously, but Ivy's expression remained unreadable, a mask of defiant calm. The evidence was irrefutable, and the air thickened with tension. I felt a cold clarity settle over me, as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes. There was no going back. The hope that had once flickered for reconciliation died in that moment, replaced by a steely resolve. Standing there, facing the family, I felt something shift deep inside. The girl who had bent and bent to keep peace was gone. In her place stood a woman who refused to be silenced or sidelined. My voice, once soft and pleading, was steady and firm. "This isn't just about jewelry," I said, locking eyes with Ivy. "It's about trust, about respect, about the legacy Mom entrusted me with." The words echoed through the room, carrying the weight of years of sacrifice and betrayal. My heart pounded not from fear, but from the fierce determination to protect what was rightfully mine. For the first time, I felt like the guardian of our family's story, not just the silent provider. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to stand my ground. In the quiet that followed, I retreated to the solitude of my room, the silence a stark contrast to the storm inside me. I revisited the memories of all the years I'd given, countless hours supporting aging relatives, managing finances, smoothing over conflicts, all while Ivy's subtle betrayals gnawed away at the foundation I was trying to build. Anger simmered beneath the surface, a fire fueled by the pain of being dismissed and exploited. I began to catalog the moments of manipulation, the sly comments, the whispered lies, the calculated gaslighting. It was a pattern, not random cruelty, but a deliberate campaign to undermine me. The emotional weight was overwhelming, but beneath it, a fierce clarity took root. "Never again," I whispered to myself in the dark. The grief of loss was still raw, but it was now intertwined with a purposeful anger that demanded action. I realized I held a secret power: the legal ownership of the jewelry, the detailed photographs, and the insurance policies. These were not just relics, they were tools. Leverage I had kept hidden, waiting for the time I would need them most. The betrayal had torn a hole in my heart, but it could not erase the strength I had built. In that moment of awakening, I understood that my fight was not just about reclaiming stolen property. It was about reclaiming my voice, my dignity, and my place in this fractured family. The pain had forged a new resolve within me, an unyielding determination to stand firm and demand justice. I would no longer be the victim of Ivy's manipulations. I would be the architect of the truth, shaping the narrative on my own terms. The journey ahead would be difficult, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready. That evening, I sat across from Daniel in our living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting shadows that mirrored the heaviness in my chest. I laid out everything: the bill of sale, the police report, the years of betrayal. His eyes locked with mine, a mixture of concern and unwavering support shining through. "We need a plan," I said quietly, the words tasting both like a confession and a battle cry. Daniel nodded. "I'm with you. Every step." The weight on my shoulders felt lighter in his presence. Together, we began to map out a strategy, not a reckless confrontation, but a calculated exposure of Ivy's deception. We talked through using the documented evidence, consulting legal counsel, and carefully rallying family members who might still stand with me. Daniel offered to handle communications and logistical details, knowing I needed space to focus on the emotional and legal challenges ahead. Our plan had to be discreet, measured, but resolute. The goal was clear: to bring the truth into the light at the right moment, in a way that Ivy could not deny or twist. As we spoke late into the night, I felt a shift inside me, a strategic mindset replacing the confusion and pain. The silent provider was becoming an active defender, poised to reclaim what was lost and protect what remained. The road was uncertain, the risks real, but I had found an ally in Daniel and a purpose that burned brighter than ever. The reckoning was coming, and I would face it head-on, armed with truth, resilience, and the unwavering belief that I deserved better. Ivy's web of lies would unravel, and I would be the one to pull the threads. I sat at the kitchen table, the soft hum of late afternoon light filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across the scattered papers before me. This wasn't just paperwork. It was the map of battlefield vulnerabilities, the inventory of what I held in this fractured family's delicate balance. Carefully, I cataloged each dependency: financial, emotional, legal, drawing a clear line between what I provided and what Ivy and the others relied on without ever acknowledging. Bills paid, assets managed, caregiving scheduled. All of it fell under my quiet, relentless stewardship. The weight was heavy, but so was the clarity. They needed me far more than I needed them. I pulled out the photographs I'd taken of every piece of Mom's jewelry, each photo a stark reminder of what Ivy had recklessly sold behind my back. The sparkling sapphires, delicate gold filigree, and heirloom pearls were more than possessions. They were family history, trust shattered in cold transactions. Beside the photos, I laid out the sales receipts, the police reports, and the bank statements that had revealed Ivy's secret withdrawals. Some of those figures were staggering. Hundreds, sometimes thousands, siphoned under vague pretenses. It wasn't just money. It was a pattern of betrayal. My fingers trembled slightly as I reread texts between Ivy and Lisa, their messages hinting at accomplices and whispered schemes. The duplicity ran deeper than I'd imagined, spreading like poison beneath the family's surface. Next, I consulted with my lawyer over the phone, her voice calm but resolute as she confirmed that the estate's documents were airtight, that my authority as executor and guardian of the assets was legally unimpeachable. It was a relief, but also a tool. I needed every advantage, every detail documented and cross-checked. I made a checklist: photos, receipts, bank records, legal papers, witness statements. Each piece a thread woven into a tapestry of evidence that would someday be undeniable. I paused, staring out the window, the late sun warming the cold sting of betrayal in my chest. The realization settled fully in me. This wasn't a family crisis. It was a power dynamic. I was the linchpin, the one holding the fragile structure together, even as Ivy tried to tear it apart. The phrase echoed in my mind, almost a mantra. They need me more than I need them. It was not arrogance, but a quiet acknowledgement of my own strength, the foundation beneath the chaos. I was the silent provider, yes, but also the one with the power to redefine this broken narrative. The thought steadied me, grounding my resolve. I didn't need to fight blindly. I had leverage, and I would use it with precision. As I closed the folder, sealing the evidence inside, my voice was barely a whisper, but carried the weight of a promise. This ends on my terms. The house felt colder that evening, the silence stretched thin but purposeful. I moved deliberately through days that blended into weeks, a quiet storm gathering beneath my calm exterior. Passwords were changed, bank accounts, estate portals, email addresses, tightening the web of control around essential assets. The calls I returned, the family gatherings I attended, the polite smiles I offered, all carefully constructed masks. Ivy and Lisa, oblivious to the slow tightening grip around their schemes, continued their petty plotting, blind to the fact that the game was shifting beneath their feet. I updated legal documents with the lawyer's careful guidance, ensuring the estate's direction was unambiguous. Notices were sent to financial institutions, alerting them to suspicious activities and potential fraud. No alarms were sounded to the family, no accusations or hints. This was the calm before the storm, and I intended it to be silent and untraceable. Daniel stood by me discreetly, monitoring communications and quietly feeding me information about any unusual movements or whispered conversations. His presence was a comfort and a shield. "No one suspects a thing," he said one morning over coffee, eyes sharp but voice steady. I nodded, feeling the tension coil tighter inside me, like a spring set to release. The ordinary rhythms of family life carried on. Dinners filled with polite chatter, phone calls about mundane details, laughter that felt hollow. But beneath it all, the tension simmered. I could feel it in the way Ivy's eyes flickered briefly toward me when she thought no one was watching, in Lisa's forced smiles that didn't reach her eyes. I stayed measured, my demeanor calm and unreadable, unwilling to give them even the smallest hint that the foundation beneath them was shifting. The quiet confidence was mine to hold, a shield forged from months of betrayal and preparation. I knew the moment was coming when this delicate balance would shatter, and when it did, they would find me unbreakable. One evening, as I reviewed old emails while sorting through financial statements, a single encrypted message caught my eye, an anomaly buried in the digital noise. My heart thudded as I worked through the layers, the words revealing themselves with chilling clarity. Ivy and Lisa had been collaborating behind my back for years, their secret alliance a dark thread weaving through every act of betrayal. They coordinated the jewelry sales, spread vicious rumors to isolate me, and manipulated Frank and other relatives to turn against me. It was a web of lies, and I was the target caught in the center. The sense of betrayal cut deeper than before. These weren't just isolated acts of jealousy. It was a calculated campaign of sabotage, engineered and executed in tandem. As I read through their messages, the scale of deception unfolded like a cold shadow over my efforts to hold the family together. I clenched my fists, the betrayal twisting into a fierce clarity. For all their charm and smiles, Ivy and Lisa had conspired to dismantle everything I'd built from the inside. I felt a surge of vindication mixed with fury. The truth was now undeniable, and it carried with it the weight of years of lies. Yet, beneath the shock was a growing resolve, a moral justification that steeled me for what had to come. This was no longer simply about protecting what was mine. It was about exposing the full extent of their deceit, ensuring no hidden alliances remained to undermine me again. The discovery reshaped everything I thought I knew about the family and the battle I was facing. I sat back, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, and knew this revelation would deepen the impact of the confrontation ahead. The fight was no longer just mine. It was a reckoning for the entire tangled web they'd spun. The quiet of the house seemed heavier that night, the weight of the discovery settling over me like a cloak. I reached for my phone and called Daniel, my voice steady but laced with urgency. "There's more than just Ivy. Lisa's in this too. They've been working together all along." His silence on the other end only confirmed what I feared. "We need to be even more careful," he said. "This changes everything." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. The sting of betrayal was sharp, but so was the fire it ignited. I wasn't just defending my place anymore. I was preparing to dismantle theirs. The first moves were deliberate, precise, and calculated. With a quiet confidence, I began withdrawing financial support to Ivy. The steady stream of funds that had kept her afloat now cut off without fanfare. I notified the bank and estate lawyers of the fraudulent transactions I'd uncovered, initiating freezes on accounts and placing holds on suspicious withdrawals. Ivy's world, once cushioned by my silent support, began to tighten unexpectedly. I watched from a distance, noting the subtle changes, the way her fingers trembled when she tried to access funds, the terse phone calls she made in frustration. Legal notices arrived at Ivy's door, formal and cold, accusing her of unauthorized sales and financial mismanagement. She and Lisa scrambled to piece together what was happening, but their confusion only deepened the divide. They didn't realize that I was the architect, the quiet force behind the sudden obstacles. Daniel managed family communications with a poised efficiency, deflecting Ivy and Lisa's attempts to gather information or rally allies. He was my shield in the shadows, ensuring I remained unseen, my moves unreadable. Despite the tightening noose, I maintained an outward calm. Polite greetings, neutral tones, a mask of civility that concealed the storm beneath. When Ivy confronted me quietly about the frozen accounts, I met her gaze steadily. "There are irregularities that need to be addressed," I said, voice calm but firm. "Until then, access is suspended." She glared, but said nothing further, her fury simmering beneath a veneer of control. I felt a quiet confidence grow inside me as I watched her struggle to grasp the shifting power dynamics. The first consequences had landed squarely on Ivy, and though the battle was far from over, I took solace in this small victory. The house felt different now, charged with an invisible tension, a quiet war unfolding beneath the surface. Ivy's calculated schemes were beginning to unravel, and Lisa's complicity was no longer hidden. I sensed their unease, the first cracks appearing in their facade. But I held back the full extent of my hand, knowing that timing was everything. Every move was measured, every communication weighed. The initial strikes had unsettled them, but I remained the calm center, the silent provider transformed into a poised strategist. This was just the beginning, and I was ready for what came next. The day of the family reunion arrived, and the house buzzed with a strange mixture of warmth and tension. I stood quietly in the corner of the large living room, watching relatives exchange hugs and small talk, their eyes flickering nervously in my direction. Ivy was there, flawless as ever, her smile practiced but brittle. Frank lingered awkwardly. Lisa hovered near the buffet, and the rest of the family milled about, unaware of the storm about to break. I had prepared meticulously. Every photo, every document, every piece of incriminating evidence was ready to be laid bare. The weight of months of betrayal pressed down on me, but beneath it was a calm fire. The knowledge that truth was on my side. When I called everyone to gather in the study, the chatter died instantly. Eyes locked onto me, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled suspicion. I took a deep breath and began, my voice steady but carrying the gravity of what I was about to reveal. The projector flickered on, and the first slide displayed Mom's jewelry collection, each piece gleaming, each photo a silent testament to what had been stolen. I watched the faces change as I moved through the sequence, the legal documents proving ownership, the bills of sale showing unauthorized transactions, and then the damning texts between Ivy and Lisa. I could see Ivy's usual poise crack. Her eyes widened, her lips tightening like she was fighting to say something, but no words came. I read aloud excerpts from their messages, the collusion between them laid bare in cold, undeniable language. The room felt heavier with each revelation. I saw disbelief flicker across Frank's face, and even Lisa's forced composure faltered. A few cousins exchanged glances, silent apologies hidden in their eyes for having doubted me before. The power dynamic shifted palpably. I was no longer the silent victim, but the one holding the undeniable truth. "No more betrayal," I said firmly, my voice unwavering. "This ends now." The room fell into stunned silence, the tension so thick it felt like a physical presence. I wasn't just speaking to them. I was reclaiming my space, my respect, my family. As I stepped back from the projector, I noticed Ivy's hands trembling ever so slightly. Her mask had slipped, and the facade of charm was gone. The family's usual murmur of gossip was replaced by a reverent hush, as if we were all breathing in the weight of what had finally been uncovered. I felt a surge of quiet satisfaction, but also a profound sadness for what had been lost along the way. This moment was my victory, but it came at a cost. Still, I held my ground, eyes sweeping over the faces that once doubted me. In that room, with every word spoken and every truth revealed, the power that had been quietly mine all along finally surfaced, undeniable and absolute. The days following the reunion were a whirlwind of whispered confrontations and hushed phone calls. Ivy's world began to unravel quickly, the threads of her deceit pulling apart in the hands of those she had once manipulated. Family members who had been caught between loyalty and doubt now confronted her in private, their questions sharp and unforgiving. "Why did you do this?" Frank's voice was low but edged with betrayal when he confronted Ivy after a family dinner. I heard through the grapevine that financial institutions had started investigations, and the pawn shops where she'd sold pieces were cooperating, asking questions that sent Ivy into a panic. Lisa's role, once hidden in shadows, was no secret anymore, and her own standing within the family diminished alongside Ivy's. Despite the chaos, my phone remained mostly silent, save for the occasional desperate message from Ivy or Lisa. Apologies, pleas for forgiveness, frantic offers to make amends. Each time, I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the old urge to soften and forgive. But I had learned that mercy without boundaries only invited more pain. I crafted careful replies, reminding them that all communication must now be through legal representatives, no direct contact, no second chances without accountability. It was a boundary I needed to protect my own peace. Some relatives who had once turned away or whispered doubts began reaching out to me quietly, their voices tinged with regret and newfound respect. "I should have believed you," one cousin admitted. These small gestures were balm to the wounds Ivy had opened, a subtle shift in the family's fractured foundation. The fractures deepened as news spread, and Ivy's social circle shrank like a dying flame. Invitations stopped, friends withdrew, and the veneer of normalcy she once maintained cracked irreparably. Family gatherings became smaller, more cautious affairs, as the weight of betrayal settled into the collective consciousness. I watched all this with a controlled satisfaction that was tempered by empathy for what the consequences meant, not just for Ivy and Lisa, but for all of us. The family was irrevocably changed, but amid the ruins, I stood taller, no longer the quiet caretaker but the matriarchal authority holding the pieces together, ready to rebuild on a foundation of truth and respect. Ivy's response to the crumbling world around her was bitter and desperate. Threats of lawsuits followed, accusations hurled like weapons in a last-ditch attempt to discredit me. She painted herself as the victim of defamation and emotional blackmail, spinning a narrative that some of our mutual friends hesitated to reject outright. She enlisted a few relatives to pressure me into family peace, urging me to drop the matter for the sake of unity. But I was prepared. My evidence was airtight, and I had legal counsel ready to respond swiftly. The attempts to manipulate me back into silence fell flat. I held firm, refusing to give in to intimidation or false narratives. Publicly, Ivy's victimhood story gained no traction. Her isolation deepened as people saw through the veneer, recognizing the pattern of deceit and manipulation. Lisa sought to mend fences, approaching me with hesitant apologies and explanations, but I rebuffed her. Key family members stood by me, their support a quiet but firm shield against the last gasps of antagonism. I felt no need for retaliation beyond standing my ground. The battles had been fought in documents and quiet confrontations. Now they were over. Ivy and Lisa's last cards were exposed and failed, and the family's new order was clear. I was the architect of justice, the keeper of truth and dignity. Life 6 months later was quieter, softer in a way I had not dared to imagine during those dark days. Daniel and the children filled our home with laughter and light, a sanctuary where the wounds could begin to heal. Family gatherings still happened, but they were smaller, healthier, framed by clear boundaries and mutual respect. Ivy and Lisa faced the long-term consequences of their actions, strained relationships, financial difficulties. But I carried no bitterness. Only a quiet, firm resolve that protecting myself and the legacy Mom left was a strength I had earned with clarity and courage. I often thought about the jewelry, now safely secured and cataloged, each piece a symbol of both loss and empowerment. The heirlooms were no longer just objects but markers of a journey, one of betrayal, resilience, and ultimately, reclamation. My relationship with Dad had begun to mend, rebuilt carefully on honesty and the truths I had unearthed. Daniel remained my steadfast partner, his unwavering support, a reminder that love and loyalty could heal even the deepest wounds. I embraced this new chapter with a calm acceptance, knowing I had earned peace not by preaching or demanding, but by standing firm and insisting on respect earned through actions. The silent provider had finally found her voice, and with it, a freedom that no betrayal could ever take away.